Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Watang Yu. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This is the first day of a 5-day course where I'm going to help you guys establish a foundation in the path to enlightenment. I have many things to teach you over the next several days, but we're going to just get started with meditation so you guys can practice some meditation. And then afterwards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the course so that you understand what it is that you'll be learning over the next 5 days. And then we're going to go into our first talk, which is I'm going to share the life story of the Buddha with you so that you understand about this individual and what his life was all about, so that then you can move forward with learning his teachings. We're going to take a mid-morning break, and then when we come back from that, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment, where you understand what this mental state is. Because if you're interested in moving your mind to this enlightened mental state, you'd like to know what it is. So I'm going to help you to understand what it is. Then we're going to take a lunch break for about an hour and a half, and when we come back, I'm going to teach Buddhist chanting. So that's our kind of agenda for today and our plan for today. But we're just going to get started with some meditation. And all of you guys here have meditated with me before, so you guys know that I use the chants over there to chant and ease the mind into meditation. So if you guys would like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. For those of you guys online, if you would like to chant along, you can go to buddhadailywisdom.com, click on free books, and then if you scroll down towards the bottom, you'll see the daily chanting sheet there. We use this as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. This isn't a rite or ritual or a ceremony, worship or prayer or anything like that. There's none of those kinds of things included in the teachings of the Buddha. If you've seen those kinds of things, they're not actually the teachings of the Buddha, even though people might be doing them in Buddhist environments. So I'm going to use the chanting to ease into the meditation. Then I'm going to come in with some guidance to help you learn meditation as I'm actually guiding you in the meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating together. Then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to join, just make yourself comfortable. The seated position is a common way to sit. I'm going to teach you guys all the ins and outs of meditation tomorrow afternoon. But for now, I'll just give you guys a chance to experience it for the next few days until we get to that point. So if you'd like to join in the meditation, you're welcome to chant, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manu Sanam Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโอตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone online as well. We've got 5 days of learning ahead of you where you can establish a foundation in the path to enlightenment. I'm going to explain to you later on this morning what enlightenment is so you'll understand what this is. But just so you know now that it's a mental state that you can attain in this life. And this comes through training of the mind. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce you to the course so that you understand what it is that you're going to be able to learn over the next 5 days. And then I'm going to move into a topic of helping you to understand the life story of Gotama Buddha. As I teach, I always pause at different times, opening up for questions, because that's part of learning and growing on the path to enlightenment, is you're going to need clarification. There are certain things that you're going to hear me talk about with the teachings of the Buddha that you don't necessarily understand right away, and you're going to need clarification. So at any time that you guys have questions, you'll see that I pause at different times. We have microphones over there in a white bowl by the bookshelf. You're welcome to help yourself to get a microphone. There's enough of you guys. You could almost have a microphone or there's enough microphones that you could have one almost for everybody. And you guys can share the microphones as well. And then online, you guys can ask questions by putting them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like that way by unmuting your microphone. So I'm going to help you to understand the course. Essentially, we're going to be meeting each day at 9 a.m. I'll start with meditation. You'll see how I do that. We'll take a mid-morning break. Then we're going to have a lunch break. Then we generally finish around 3 o'clock each day. Okay, so this is my contact information if you guys would like to contact me for any reason. If you're coming to class, that's great. I'll teach you. If you're not coming to class, that's okay. You don't have to let me know about that. You have your own personal schedule. You know where you need to be at any given time. This contact information is more so after class, because you're not going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. You're going to need continuous help beyond the class. So students oftentimes would like to contact me after class. So you can contact me in any of these different ways. And there's some other ways too. I have all of this on my website, but you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. You'll be able to get help through asking questions in classes. You'll be able to post on our Facebook group and I'll help you there. You can send private messages using any of these ways, or you can schedule personal guidance where either we can meet in person or online and I'll be able to help you. So there's plenty of opportunity for you to get help. And this is just some contact information for you guys to be able to get help as you need help. In terms of the way that our day is usually structured is obviously today, kind of just introducing you guys to the course. But the way that we start each morning is with this chanting and meditation. You'll see I do that each morning at 9 a.m. So when you guys come in, if you guys would like to come in and join for meditation, I'll be starting right at 9 o'clock each day. So you're welcome to join then, because you'll get in the ability to have meditation each day, essentially meditating in the morning and in the afternoon is what we're going to be doing. So at least here, you're going to be meditating twice in a day. And if you do that over the 5 days of the course, your mind will get used to getting some training. And you can even meditate in the evening too on your own to get a third meditation in if you like. So I'm going to be meditating with you each day around 9 o'clock. I'll be starting at that time. Then we'll finish up usually around 9:30, and that's where I'll have a discussion on the teachings. Some people refer to this as a Dhamma talk because the word Dhamma means teachings, so it's a talk on the teachings where you'll learn about the teachings of the Buddha, because you can't just meditate your way to enlightenment. There's more than just meditation that you would need to understand and practice in order to be able to get to enlightenment. Then we're going to take a mid-morning break. I generally do that around 10:30 to 11, somewhere around there, where we take a break, give you guys a chance to use the restroom and talk with each other, get some snacks and things like this. Really do whatever you would like to do. And then we come back from our break at that point and I share some more teachings with you. Then generally around 12 o'clock, maybe sometimes earlier, sometimes later, we take a lunch break. And we usually try to get about an hour and a half lunch break where you can go out and get some food. You can get some refreshments. Sometimes people like to come here or stay here. You're welcome to take a nap here. You might even see me doing that from time to time. Sometimes people like to do some stretching and some yoga and things like that. So feel free to use this space for yourself. You can even come in the morning early if you like. I'm usually here no later than 8:30, but sometimes I get here as early as 8:15. So you're welcome to come in. And if you'd like to be here even earlier than that, you can just let me know, because the door has a lock on it that I can just give you the combination to, and you're welcome to come in if you like. So you're welcome to use the space however you like, before class, during lunch, and all that good stuff. Then we generally come back from lunch at 1:30, but I'll let you know each day when we go to lunch which time we're going to restart. But we generally come back around 1:30, and then I teach you some more. I'm usually teaching about meditation in the afternoons. That's usually what it is. This afternoon, I'm going to be teaching Buddhist chanting to help you guys understand what the chanting is all about, the history of that, how it's used, and all those good things. We'll actually be doing some chanting together. So that's part of your meditation practice. So each afternoon, you'll see me teaching about meditation. And then we'll generally finish around 3 p.m. each day. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. Just depends on what we're actually doing in our class. Then all of this we're going to be doing for 4 days. And on the 5th day, I'm going to invite you guys to a field trip, where if you'd like to go out to some Buddhist temples, there's a forest temple just outside the city, about 20 minutes. And then there's another temple up on the mountain called Wat Doi Sutep that I usually take students to and visit, so that you can learn the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism of a temple, so that when you go to a temple, it actually has more meaning for you, that you'll understand what you're seeing, rather than just, oh, wow, that's pretty, or oh, wow, that's interesting. The teachings of the Buddha are actually embedded into the construction of these temples. And if you understand the teachings of of the Buddha, which you'll have a bit of a foundation over those 4 days, Monday through Thursday. Then Friday, we can go to the temples and I can walk you around and teach you the symbolism of the things that you're seeing. And then it's almost like when you visit a temple, the walls kind of speak to you because you'll understand more about what you're seeing, that it's not just a statue, it's not just a building, it actually has real meaning for you. So if you'd like to come to the field trip, you can come. Anybody's welcome to come, even if they're not here during the course. You'll see some people will actually join us for the field trip that aren't actually here for the course throughout the entire week. So anybody and everybody's welcome to that. And I'll give you guys more details on that when we get closer to it. Usually around Thursday, I usually give you guys some more details about it so you understand how it's organized and all that good stuff. But if you're here at each day at 9 a.m., you'll be able to go on this tour with no problem. So it's kind of like a classroom without walls. So the course is based on this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is the foundational text that we have for this particular course. It's the first book of a 13-book series, and I'm going to be teaching you these chapters 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. And you'll be able to see that each day when I'm teaching. You'll be able to see which chapter it is, because there's some things in the book that aren't in the classes, and there's some things in the classes that aren't in the book. So if you get a version of this, it'll help you to be able to learn, and you can get it for free. You can download it from our website. You can take it and go print it yourself if you like. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost. Or if you have access to Amazon, you can get a version from Amazon. So you can get it in PDF, Kindle, or print. And this is a book that you're going to read many times. There's some students that have been studying with me for many years, and they tell me they've read it 8, 12 different times. And they say each time they read it, they keep gleaning information out of it. So it's not the kind of book that you just read one time and set it down. You read it multiple times. So this will help you throughout your journey to enlightenment. So the things that you're going to be learning in this course is we're going to start this morning with helping you understand the life story of the Buddha. Because if you're going to take this journey to enlightenment, this enlightened mental state that the Buddha taught, you'd kind of like to know a bit about his life. So I'm going to teach you his life story as part of our course here in a moment. Then after our mid-morning break, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment. Because if you're going to make your way to this enlightened mental state, it would be helpful to know what it is, because then you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And when you arrive, you'll actually know that you've arrived. It's kind of like if I was like, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? You'd be like, well, what's Chiang Rai, right? If you didn't know, you'd be like, well, what's Chiang Rai? That'd be your first question. I'm like, oh, well, it's a city to the north. It's over the mountains. When you get there, you're going to see this and that and this and that. You're like, that sounds interesting. Sure. And now you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And when you arrive to Chiang Rai, you'll know you're in Chiang Rai, because it's like, oh, there's that mall he was talking about. There's that park he was talking about. So you'll be able to know that you've actually arrived at Chiang Rai. So it's the same thing with enlightenment. If you know what it is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened. So I'm going to help you guys to understand what that is. Then tomorrow morning, I'm going to be helping you to understand the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths is actually part of the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths are 4 simple statements where you can learn what is the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is the very first teaching that the Buddha would share with his brand new students, because it helps you to be able to have this breakthrough to understanding why you experience things like anger and sadness and frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. You'll be able to understand why you are experiencing this, and it's not the outside world. It's not other people. It's something that's going on in your own mind, and by understanding that, you actually then be able to eliminate it, because that's what it is to get to enlightenment. Is your mind will be completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. No matter what's going on around you, you can maintain your focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Your mind won't experience these discontent feelings. So you're going to need to know what's causing these feelings in order to be able to then eliminate them. So in these 4 simple statements, you'll understand the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And then I'll teach you the Eightfold Path, which is the the path to enlightenment. If you're interested in getting to this enlightened mental state with the teachings of the Buddha, you would need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards, like the back of your hand. And students oftentimes study this multiple times. So I wouldn't be surprised if students show up tomorrow that have been studying with me for a while, that they're looking to refresh their memory on the Eightfold Path, because they will study it multiple times, because you really need to commit it to your memory. So you're not going to be able to learn it in just one time. So tomorrow will probably be the first time that some of you have learned this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha to help you to be able to learn this. And you might be saying, well, of course that's what you would do. You're like, why? How else would you study the teachings of the Buddha if you didn't use the words of the Buddha? You'd be surprised. There's about 500 million people in the world that consider themselves to be Buddhist, and a very, 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 very small percentage of them actually study with the original words of the Buddha. I've been to over 200 temples in my life, and I've only ever been to one temple that studies with the original words of the Buddha. That's less than 1%. So studying with the words of the Buddha is how you're going to get to enlightenment, but the vast majority of the world doesn't study with the original words of the Buddha. So I'm going to help you to be able to see what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach, and I'm going to invite you to be able to learn that, reflect on it, to independently verify it, and practice it. And this Eightfold Path is the full path that you need in order to be able to consistently train the mind to get to this enlightened mental state. Then on Wednesday, I'm going to be teaching you transforming the three poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. This is where you're going to learn kind of from a high level what is really plaguing the unenlightened mind and why it keeps experiencing the things that it does, and then how to fix it. So there's multiple levels of detail that the Buddha teaches, and the Four Noble Truths is one level of detail, but then the deeper level of detail comes down to the three poisons, where you kind of broaden your understanding and deepen your understanding of what's going on. But then there's an even deeper detail than that called the 10 fetters, which I'm going to introduce you to today so that you'll understand what that is. Then on Wednesday, I'm also going to teach you something called the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach that. Sometimes people think that's what the Buddha taught, and he doesn't teach that way. That sounds like rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white. That's not what the Buddha actually taught. These are 5 impactful decisions that you could make, that you could make either wisely or unwisely, that's going to produce either wholesome or unwholesome results for you. And again, I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha so you can see what did he actually teach on this important topic. And then I'm going to show you how to relate it to your day-to-day life today, so you can see how to take this teachings from the Buddha and apply it to your day-to-day life through the decisions that you're going to face in your day-to-day life. So that's what we'll be doing on Wednesday. Then I'm going to teach you on Thursday, what is Gotama and how does it affect me? This is a natural law that is affecting you at all times, whether you're aware of it or not. Some people refer to it as karma. You might have heard that. This is the Sanskrit version of that word. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so people who study his original teachings will tend to use the word Gotama. This isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not punishments and rewards or anything like that. It's a natural law that is affecting you at all times, and as you have wisdom of this natural law, that's what's going to help you to create the peace and joy in your day-to-day life. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you will struggle and you'll have difficulties. So by not understanding this natural law of Gotama, you'll make unwise decisions that will produce unwholesome results for you. But when you learn this natural law and you independently verify it and you start making decisions based in this natural law, that's where life becomes very, very peaceful, because you're now understanding the world that you live in, and you'll experience more and more wholesome results. So everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. But on Thursday, we're going to go in and specifically talk about this. I'm going to teach you 4 types of Gotama, and I'm going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome Gotama, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome Gotama. There's no unwholesome Gotama that's coming back to you because you've extinguished all that. Then also on Thursday, I'm going to teach you what is merit. This is an important topic to learn as part of your journey to enlightenment. And then I'm going to help you understand how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment. Because as I shared, nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. You're going to need continued support beyond this course. So I'll teach you guys how to get that continued support beyond this course. Then in terms of your meditation practice, I'm going to be teaching you breathing mindfulness meditation, because this is the foundational meditation that the Buddha taught that is needed in order to move the mind to enlightenment. There's other meditations as well that you can learn at different times, and I'll at least introduce you to those as part of the course, but I'm not going to teach them to you because there's other courses and other programs that I teach that help you to understand those. In terms of just getting started, the foundation is breathing mindfulness meditation. So that's what I'm going to be starting you with and building that up for you as part of our course. I'm going to teach you the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. These are 4 different positions because your body can't be in the same position all the time. You're going to need these different positions. It's like a tool belt to be able to help you. I don't know if you guys noticed, today I laid on the floor to meditate. Normally I sit in the chair here, but yesterday I did a whole bunch of work with the body and it was a little bit sore. So I used the lying position this morning because you're going to need these different positions at different times to meditate because your body can't be in the same position permanently. So I'm going to explain to you what these positions are and in which situations would you potentially use these so that then you have more tools available to you to use at different times. Then you'll learn Buddhist chanting as well. That's this afternoon. I'm going to be teaching that. And then ultimately, I'm going to teach you how to take all these things that I've been teaching you all throughout the course, how to integrate it into your day-to-day life. Because if you spend time here in this course over the next 5 days and you learn, and then you went home and you did nothing, okay, it was a great 5 days together. It was nice to spend time with you, but you're not going to get the real results of what it is that the Buddha is guiding you to be able to experience. It's only when you integrate what it is that I'm going to share with you over the next 5 days into your day-to-day life that's going to produce the results for you. So I'm going to teach you all these things throughout the week, and then at the end of the week, I'm going to teach you how to integrate it into your day-to-day life so that now you can get up and running to experience the real improvement through consistent long-term growth and development over multiple days, weeks, months, and years. Okay, so this is our plan for what it is that I'm going to be sharing with you over the next 5 days. Do you guys have any questions on what it is you're going to be learning over the next 5 days? No questions? Nobody usually has questions about that, but I usually stop just to make sure. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to teach you this first topic of the life story of Gotama Buddha. This is part of chapter 19 in the book, and I titled this chapter, The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death, because these are the things that helped motivate the Buddha to actually get to enlightenment is when he experienced sickness, aging, and death and observed that in the community. You'll see when I explain to you the story. In the unenlightened state, life can seem very difficult. By the time you get to enlightenment, life is no longer difficult. You're not struggling. You're not having difficulties any longer. There's certain challenges that you will face, but you're not experiencing the struggles and misery and despair of what we sometimes experience in the unenlightened state. So that's why I described it this way, because it was this difficult human existence that motivated the Buddha to go on this journey to figure out how to get to peace and how to get to joy. So I've organized this talk in this way, that we're going to talk about the birth of Siddhartha Gotama. We're going to talk about his early life. We're going to talk about his journey to enlightenment, what he did during his teaching career, and then we're going to ultimately talk about the sickness, aging, and death and what he discovered in terms of that. Now, normally I will pause during the talk as I am teaching in order to open up to questions. But when I teach this life story, I usually just teach the whole thing and then I open up to questions at the end, because that way you can understand this whole life story before you start asking questions. So I'm just going to teach this whole thing for you, and then I will open up for questions at the end. So this individual that we refer to as the Buddha or Gotama Buddha, or there's other ways that people refer to him as well, he was born Siddhartha Gotama. That was his name. He was born into a royal family. He was the prince, the firstborn son, destined to become the king. And his mother, being the queen, married to the king. During this time frame, if you were a woman pregnant, living with your husband, when it was time for you to give birth, you would usually go back to your homeland, wherever that was, in order to give birth, because then your parents, your brothers and sisters, and people like that would be around for you to be able to help you after the birth. So they organized a caravan for the queen to go back to her homeland so that then she could give birth in her homeland. And on her way back home, she went into labor pains in the middle of the journey. So they stopped the caravan caravan, and she gets out from the caravan and she goes over to this tree and she holds on to the branch of the tree trying to deliver the baby because it was having difficulty coming out of the birthing canal. So she's holding on to this tree and she's trying to give birth, but the baby wouldn't come out of the birthing canal. So it breaks through the side of the stomach. And because of this, she ends up dying 7 days later. Nowadays, we would just do a C-section. There'd be no problem whatsoever. But they didn't have that technology 2,500 years ago. Siddhartha Gotama was born in 563 BCE, and he was born in an area that we refer to as Nepal. But of course, that line and those borders and those countries didn't exist back then. It was just a bunch of kingdoms. So he was born in 563 BCE, and 7 days later, his mother ends up dying. And they actually have protocols in place because it wasn't uncommon for women to die during childbirth 2,500 years ago. So the protocols that they would follow and the cultural protocols were that if you had siblings, they would adopt your children as their own. If you died during childbirth and your children lived, then your siblings would adopt them as their own child. So essentially his aunt, which is his mom's older sister, became his stepmother. She adopted him and raised him as her own child. So this is how he was able to get guidance from his mother's sister, and that was his stepmother. Now, there's something that occurred according to the text during his birth that I don't know that it's true, but I don't know that it's false either. I suspect that it's false, but I'll tell you what you'll see if you end up reading in the original text, which is called the Pali Canon, what it says happened at his birth. It says that when he came out from his mother's stomach, that he immediately walked 7 steps, that there was lotus flowers blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This would be my last birth." I don't think this is actually true, because if this was true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. Because sometimes what happens is when there's someone as significant as a Buddha that comes into the world and helps countless people during their lifetime, that sometimes people embellish the story as it gets handed down from one person to the other. They try to kind of make the story look better and better and better, where we don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha. A Buddha has done amazing things in the world, and we don't need to embellish his story. But I think that's what occurred, is I think they kind of embellished the story, because if this was true, this miracle essentially that occurred, the next part of the story wouldn't be needed. The next part of the story is that his father, being the king, was very interested to know what his son was going to become. This was a common practice during this period of time. The king summoned 108 advisors, essentially fortune tellers, to come and tell him what his son was going to become. And 107 of those advisors shared with the king that your son was going to be a great ruler, a great monarch. They were going to rule over he was going to rule over your territory and expand it far and wide. And his father's like, that's my boy. Yeah, that's what he wanted, right? Expand his kingdom. Well, there was one advisor who comes in at the end and he says, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I heard all the other advisors. They're 100% accurate. Your son's going to be a great leader, but not a monarch. He's going to be a spiritual leader." And his father didn't like this. So his father decides, just in case this guy was accurate, that he was going to try to change what was going to occur. He decides to try to sequester his son in the palace, keeping him in the palace, never allowing him to go outside and get involved in worldly affairs, because he felt like if he went outside the palace into the kingdom, that he would get involved in worldly affairs and he wouldn't be interested to be a monarch and a ruler. So he kind of lavishes him with all kinds of things. He gives him, wonderful clothing, great fabrics, amazing food, great entertainment, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. Everything you can imagine a rich, wealthy father that's a king could do for their son. He did all those things for his son to try to kind of get him hooked to this lifestyle of being a king and being a monarch, because he knew that he would be unable to establish this kind of lifestyle in any other way. So he decided to try to kind of lavish him and woo him into the ways of being a monarch. So for 29 years, Siddhartha Gotama lived in the palace, sequestered in the palace and experiencing this lavish lifestyle. But at the age of 29, 29, he realizes he's about to become the king, because at this time frame, you would become the king at the age of 30, and your dad would retire. And your dad would be there to help guide you and help you to understand how to be a good king. So at the age of 29, he realized that he was about to become the king, and he had never even been outside the palace, that he hadn't even been into the kingdom. So how could he ever rule over these people as a king if he had never even been outside the palace before? So without his father knowing and against his wishes, he ends up going outside the palace. And he goes outside the palace. He takes with him his royal attendant. This is kind of like his chief of staff, right? His main confidant. And he goes outside the palace. And when he goes outside the palace, he has what's called the 4 observations. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to be able to go on this journey to enlightenment. And he's confused by what he's seeing because he hasn't seen these things before. He sees this sickly person, and he sees this disgruntledness around this sickly person. People are agitated and frustrated and irritated and annoyed. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? Why are those people functioning like that? And the royal attendant's like, oh, that guy's sick. He's the main person that's helping the family to acquire the resources that they need. And now they're not going to necessarily have the food and the things that they need in order to sustain their life because this person's sick and ill. And this was very impactful to Siddhartha Gotama because he had never lived that kind of life before. He had everything he ever needed in life, and he never understood what it was like to not have the things that you need. Because if you grew up from birth to the age of 29 having this lavish lifestyle, you'd probably think everybody lives that way. You'd never been outside the palace before. So when he saw this, that these people were struggling to be able to acquire the things that they needed, it was very impactful to him. Then he sees an aging person, kind of an older, decrepit person that was having difficulties moving around and doing the things that they needed to do. And once again, there was this disgruntledness around this person. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, it's the same thing. It's like, this person's older. They can't get the basic necessities that they need to sustain their life, and they're struggling in the world. And this, again, was very impactful to him because he hadn't seen this kind of thing before. He had everything that he needed in the world. Then he saw a dead corpse, and the people were grieving and having sorrow. And he needed to ask his royal attendant what was going on over there. And once again, it was the same story, that this person dying wasn't going to be able to help the family to acquire the things that they needed, and the family was going to be struggling as a result of this. So when Siddhartha Gotama saw all of these things, he looked at the world as being full of misery and despair, and the kingdom was full of misery and despair. And then he sees this 4th observation. The 4th observation is this person that is off meditating, training their mind, trying to understand this path to enlightenment and this better way of life. And he needed to ask his royal attendant what that person was doing. And his royal attendant explained to him that that person was trying to figure out this sickness, aging, and death, and why this keeps occurring, and why all this disgruntledness and frustration is occurring. That person's trying to figure all this out. And Siddhartha Gotama decided that that's what he would like to do. That he wasn't interested in ruling over misery and despair. He was interested in helping people. And he felt the best way that he could help people is figure out this sickness, aging, and death, and this disgruntledness and frustration, rather than ruling over this misery. So he decides he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to try to figure out how to understand this sickness, aging, and death, and how to get to enlightenment. So at this time, he was actually married. He had a young infant son. And when he got back to the palace, it was nighttime, and his wife and his child were sleeping. And he didn't understand his mind as much as he did by the time he got to enlightenment, but he understood it enough that he felt like if he said goodbye, like he hugged them and kissed them and woke them up and all these kinds of things, that he wouldn't be able to leave. He felt like, it would be too strong of a hold on his mind and he wouldn't be able to leave. So he just left in the middle of the night without letting them know. And he takes with him his favorite horse, and he takes with him his royal attendant, and he leaves out of the palace. And eventually, as he leaves out of the palace, he gets to a point where he decides to tell his royal attendant that he can leave, and he lets his horse go as well. And he cuts off his hair. At this time, if you were a member of the royal family, you would grow this really long, beautiful hair. This is how people knew you were a member of the royal family. Where today, we put pictures of the king and the queen all over the kingdom, and everybody knows who's the king and the queen, right? Put it on the money and everything else. But during the lifetime of Siddhartha Gotama, they didn't have that ability. So what they would do is they would grow their hair really long, because it was only the royal family that would be able to take care of that long, beautiful, flowing hair. They had servants and workers, and they had the time and the money to sit around, detangle their hair, shampoo their hair, comb and brush their hair. Where those of us that were working out in the fields, we would be laboring in the fields, and that long, beautiful hair would get all tangled up and knotted up, and we wouldn't be able to take care of it because we didn't have that time. So if somebody went out into the kingdom with this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew that they were a member of the royal family. So Siddhartha Gotama cutting off his hair was like, I'm never going back, because nobody would ever think that he was the king, because he'd been growing this hair for 29 years, and now he cut it off and no longer was going to have that long, beautiful, flowing hair. So it was like, I'm never going back, right? So then he ends up taking up training with two teachers. First, there's one teacher that he takes up training with, where this teacher was claiming that they had figured out how to get to enlightenment, and that he could help Siddhartha Gotama to get to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gotama takes up training with this teacher. He teaches him to hang himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce his body with metal implements, to starve himself. Don't worry, we're not going to be doing any of this stuff, right? Siddhartha Gotama figured out after a year that this stuff doesn't lead to enlightenment, right? So he goes for an entire year training with this teacher. And this teacher gets to a point where he says, you've mastered my teachings. You've learned everything that I have to teach you in this 1 year. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace, right? So he ends up leaving from this teacher, and he goes to another teacher. And he takes up this training with the second teacher. Again, this person was claiming that they knew how to get to enlightenment. And he was teaching him essentially the same things. Hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements, starving himself. And he does these things, and then he gets to the point once again after about a year where the teacher comes to him and says, you've mastered my teachings. I've taught you everything that you can learn from me. And Siddhartha Gotama was frustrated because his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. And he felt like he had wasted 2 years of his life. So frustrated, he goes off into the forest by himself. He leaves from this teacher, and he goes off into the forest, and he starts to do the same exact things that he was doing when he was working with these teachers. He takes it so far that he's actually eating 1 grain of rice per day. That's how he was sustaining himself. And as he was eating this 1 grain of rice per day and doing this for an extended period of time, he basically gets to the point where he's about to die, that he's basically skin and bones. And you might actually see artwork or statues depicting this, where his ribs are protruding, his facial bones are protruding. He's just skin and bones. And he's sitting on the edge of the forest, and he's meditating. And there's this woman and this young daughter that comes by, and they see him, and they see that he's very close to death, and they go to him with some rice, and they beg and plead with him to eat the rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice and starts eating it. And at this time, he has a realization. He realizes that when he was in the palace, he was living all this sensual pleasures. He had everything and anything you could ever imagine that somebody would need in order to be able to sustain their life. You know, royal riches and food and entertainment and everything. But when he left the palace, he went all the way over to the other side, where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realized that neither of these two extremes actually lead to enlightenment. And this is where he started to understand the middle way. And he starts to eat in moderation. And he starts to train his mind more and more closely, rather than doing physical harm to the body, because the thought was that if you cause physical harm to the body and your mind could overcome that pain, that you would get to enlightenment. So he realized that that didn't work. So he started to train his mind instead of focusing on causing pain to the physical body. body. He comes to the middle. And over the next 4 years, he actually gets to enlightenment. So a total of 6 years, he gets to enlightenment. And he knows that his mind is enlightened because it's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. He doesn't experience anger anymore. There's no annoyment or frustration or the slightest little ickiness in the mind. And he knows that he's gotten to enlightenment, but his teachings are radically different than anything that anybody else was teaching at the time. Everyone else was hanging themselves upside down from trees and laying on beds of nails and starving themselves. And his teachings was all about training the mind. So he goes to this tree, which is what we refer to as Northeast India. There's a place that this tree is actually still there that you can actually go visit. We're actually going to be taking some students there this year on a tour around these different sites. But nonetheless, he hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks. And he contemplates whether or not he should share his teachings with others because he didn't think the world was ready for his teachings. But ultimately, after 7 weeks of thinking about this, he decides that he is going to go share his teachings because it was a matter of going back to the palace and living a life there or going off and sharing his teachings. And he decides to go off and share his teachings. So he starts making his way back towards the area where he was studying with those original 2 teachers. And as he does, he comes in contact with 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he comes in contact with them, they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him because they see him coming and he's got meat on his bones. He looks healthy. He's bright. He's vibrant. And to them, in order to get to enlightenment, you needed to be starving yourself. You needed to be disparaging the physical body. So they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. So they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. So he goes over to where he's at. And by the way, by the time you get to enlightenment, if someone's joking and mocking you like that, your mind's not affected by that. Your mind's still completely peaceful and joyful. So the Buddha just walks over to where they were at and he sits down on the ground and he takes his hand and he touches the earth. And he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. When he touched the earth, the animals came to where he was at. So there was birds and squirrels and deer and lizards and snakes and rabbits and all these different things. They came to where he was at. And these 5 people were like, okay, you have our attention. What do you have to say? And they sat down and he delivers the 4 noble truths. The 4 statements that you're going to learn tomorrow. What is the problem in the mind? What is the cause of that problem? The elimination of it in the path forward. And the way that a Buddha's teachings work is they're independently verifiable. So by the Buddha describing those 4 independent statements, people could see that he had indeed got to enlightenment. He had figured it out. So tomorrow, when I teach you the 4 noble truths, you'll be able to see the truth for yourself, that his teachings aren't based in belief. You'll be able to independently verify the truth for yourself. So when he delivered his teachings, they could independently verify that he had figured out how to get to enlightenment because in 4 simple statements, he was able to explain the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. So those become his first 5 students. And from there, he just keeps teaching and teaching and teaching. He doesn't perform any more miracles because a Buddha's teachings aren't based in belief. It's not based in people being convinced that you are a Buddha. He can actually help people more easily if people don't know that he's an actual Buddha. Because if everybody knew that he was a Buddha, let's just say like the ear was turned a certain way, or a certain mole in a certain location, and everybody knew he was a Buddha. When people came around him, they all be on their best behavior. One of the real powers and strengths of a Buddha is that people don't know that they're actually a Buddha. And now they can observe the quality of their student's mind and then provide them teachings that are going to help them to be able to progress on the path to enlightenment. So if everybody knew that he was a Buddha, they would be on their best behavior when they're around him, and you wouldn't be able to see their natural mind. So he didn't keep performing miracles to convince people that he was a Buddha. He just taught people, and then they independently verified his teachings, and more his community kept growing and growing and growing and growing. Sometimes other teachers would come to the Buddha with their students, and they would ask the Buddha questions, and they would have discussions with the Buddha to try to figure out if his teachings were truly what led to enlightenment. And sometimes these teachers would get so angry and frustrated in the meeting, they would go storm off from the meeting. And then that person's students could see, oh my goodness, my teacher's not enlightened. And those students would become students of the Buddha. Or sometimes that teacher, understanding the teachings of the Buddha well, would then become a student of the Buddha themselves, realizing that they're not enlightened and that they needed to learn with the Buddha. And they would bring with them their students. So the community of students of the Buddha just kept growing and growing and growing. He taught from the age of 35 all the way to the age of 80. He teaches for 45 years, and he ultimately dies at the age of 80 from old age. And the community of practitioners was massive. He had helped countless people get to enlightenment by this point, right? And then he ends up dying at the age of 80. So there's 3 criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this individual, Gotama Buddha, or the Buddha, or Siddhartha Gotama was his original name, we know that he was a Buddha because he meets these 3 primary criteria. And there's some other criteria that we'll talk about as well, but these are the 3 primary criteria. So we know that he was a Buddha because there's even people today that are getting to enlightenment based on his original teachings. So this is his life story, and what led to him actually going on this journey to enlightenment were those 4 observations of sickness, aging, and death. And what he discovered as part of this is the reason why people are so disgruntled and so frustrated when they experience sickness is that their mind is craving permanent health, where this body is not permanent. This body is impermanent. It's going to be constantly changing. But when you crave permanent health, not realizing that this body is impermanent, when you're sick, your mind doesn't understand that and it struggles, and you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Same thing with aging. The mind will crave permanent youthfulness. And now as you get wrinkles, as you get gray hair, as you get all these other things that are changing, you can't move around as easily anymore. If you're craving this permanent youthfulness, when you start experiencing this change of the physical body, the mind doesn't like that change. But this body is impermanent. It can't be permanently youthful. And then the mind can crave permanent life. So when you get close to death, or when the people around you get close to death, if you're craving permanent life, now when you're needing to die, because this life is not permanent, the mind really struggles during that period of time. Or when the people around you are dying, if you're craving for them to be permanent, then your mind's going to struggle during that period of time, because everything around you is constantly changing. It is impermanent. So the Buddha discovers that the sickness, aging, and death is just impermanence, that it's just change, and the mind doesn't understand that in the unenlightened state. And the reason why we experience sickness, aging, and death is because of birth. Because we're born, we're going to experience sickness, aging, and death. There's no way around that if there's birth, there's going to be sickness, aging, and death. So the Buddha helps people to understand this as part of his teachings. So do you guys have any questions on the Buddha's life story? This individual referred to as Siddhartha Gotama. Let's see if we have any questions online here. You have a question? Yeah, go for it.
Did he ever return to his family?
What's that?
Did the Buddha ever return to his family?
Oh, yes. So after he got to enlightenment, he came back to the region of the area where his kingdom was, and his wife ends up ordaining with him. His son ends up ordaining with him. His stepmother was actually the first female that ever ordained with him. His cousins and brother-in-laws, so much to the point that his father, the king, was begging and pleading with him not to ordain any more of the royal family, because he was concerned that the royal family was going to fall apart because he was craving permanence. So the the Buddha instituted a guideline that if you were going to ordain with him, you needed to have your family's support in order to be able to come learn with him, because people were coming out of the home. So his son ends up getting to enlightenment. His wife gets to enlightenment. His stepmother gets to enlightenment. Many other people end up getting to enlightenment. This is one of the big myths about the life story of the Buddha. People think he left his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. You can see it in his original teachings that these people actually came and learned with him. They got to enlightenment, and many members of his family actually ended up ordaining with him. Mm-hmm.
Teacher David, my question is, if I have 3 questions, but the first one is if he had any siblings. I don't know if he had siblings.
Yeah, I have an older sister. She's about 2.5 years older than me.
No, yeah, you and...
Oh, Siddhartha, I'm sorry. I thought you said me.
Yeah, I knew you had a sister.
I've got some sound right here. This is some impermanence, right? So Siddhartha Gotama, did he have siblings? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure whether he had brothers and sisters or not. I haven't heard anything about brothers and sisters, so I tend to think he didn't. But he may have. I don't know 100%.
And did he have a kid did he have another child after he got enlightened?
No, once you get to enlightenment, by that time, you're no longer going to be having sex, because as long as you have sexual craving in your mind, when you're having sex, you'll be happy and excited. But by the time, if you're not having sex anymore, if you have craving in your mind for sex, then you're going to be agitated and frustrated and annoyed. You can't get to permanent peace and permanent joy as long as you have a craving for sex. You can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having sexual relationships, and that's what sometimes people do, particularly younger people. They will actually do all the work on the path to enlightenment, make their way up to the second stage of enlightenment, and then they'll kind of hang out there for a while, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever. They will hang out there. So they'll do all the other work on the path, and they'll be quite peaceful in the second stage of enlightenment, but they're still going to have agitation and frustration around sex. That when they're having sex, they're going to have pleasant feelings, and maybe even for a few hours and a few days afterwards. But when they're not having sex, they're going to be angry and frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. I'm sure you understand, right? If you've ever gone through that experience, that your mind's longing, yearning for it, and you're wanting it so bad, right? So by the time he got to enlightenment, he wouldn't have been having sex any longer at that point.
Thank you. And the next question is, how did his son carry his teachings, follow his path?
He got to enlightenment, but he didn't continue the teachings forward. Shortly after the death of the Buddha, about 3 to 6 months after the death of the Buddha, during his lifetime, everything was taught orally because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. So it wasn't until after his death that the technology made its way from China over to that region of the world, and they started to be able to write things down. So about 3 to 6 months after his death, 500 enlightened beings came together, and there were countless that existed by the time the Buddha died, but 500 of them came together to start documenting his teachings. And I suspect that his son was part of that 500, but I don't know with 100% certainty. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't forget the teachings that it took for you to get to enlightenment. Your mind will be performing optimally at that point. You'll have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. So those 500 enlightened beings coming together, their mind would be performing very optimally, and they would thoroughly remember what it took for them to get to that enlightened mental state, because you won't forget that wisdom. And they documented the teachings, and they agreed that, okay, this is what the Buddha taught us. And now we refer to that as the Pali Canon. That's the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings. It's 45 volumes that are this thick. But I don't know whether his son contributed to that, or whether his son continued his lineage, so to speak, in teaching and so forth and so on. The community became fairly fractured not too long after the Buddha died, and he predicted this, that his community would fracture, that he encouraged people during his lifetime to learn and practice and train their mind, because while he was alive, the community was cohesive because he was alive. And then once he died, for about 500 years after his death, the community was pretty strong and lots of people were getting to enlightenment. But about 500 years after his death, that's where we see the first major kind of fracture of his community. And this is where we get things like Mahayana Buddhism, if you know what that is. It's practiced in China and some other places throughout the world. And then about 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha, there's another big fracture where we get Vajrayana Buddhism, which is what they practice in Tibet and things like this, where people started changing his teachings. One of the things that he taught when he was alive is don't change his teachings, because as soon as you change a Buddha's teachings, it doesn't lead to enlightenment anymore. But that's what people did because the community started fracturing. Because if you can imagine, during the lifetime of the Buddha, these countless people that were studying with him, there would have been a core group of people that were really close and learning the teachings very closely. Those are the people that are getting to enlightenment. But there were people in the outer fringes that were just kind of learning and kind of dabbling with his teachings, and they didn't really understand them 100%. So those individuals were the ones that kind of fractured early on and kind of started going out and doing their own things, where the group of people that were close to the Buddha, they're the ones who got together, documented the teachings, and were really making sure that the teachings continued in the world after his death.
Okay, thank you, David. My last question is Buddha has anyone ever tried to kill him? And how did he handle that situation? Was he ever did anybody try to attempt to take his life, assassinate him?
Yeah, there were two incidences that I'm aware of where people tried to kill him during his lifetime. One of them was one of his cousins was very jealous of him because he saw him. Apparently, the Buddha during his lifetime was very handsome, and women were very attracted to him. And he was also growing this large community of people that were learning and becoming enlightened, and he was the leader of this community. And this cousin wanted to be the Buddha, wanted to be the person who was leading the community. So there's a story of this person pushing a big boulder off of a mountain that he was trying to kill the Buddha that way, but of course it didn't kill him. And then there's another story where there was one time that the Buddha was walking from one town to the other, and the people were telling the Buddha not to walk down this street. And he was like, why? And they're like, there's a murderer down there, and that murderer has killed 999 people. And the Buddha was like, okay. And he just kept on walking down the street, not paying attention to what they had said. And as he was walking down the street, this murderer who wore the fingers of these 999 people around his necklace on his neck, he started chasing after the Buddha with a sword. And as he was walking, the Buddha was walking to this other town, this murderer was chasing after him with a sword. And he kept yelling at the Buddha. He said, stop, stop, stop. And the Buddha just kept walking. And this person was chasing him with the sword, like, stop, stop, stop. And he was yelling at the Buddha. And the Buddha just kept walking. And then he yells, stop, stop, stop. So the Buddha stops, and he turns around, and this person runs up to him. And the Buddha says, I have stopped. It's you that hasn't stopped. I stopped killing. I stopped stealing. I stopped sexual misconduct. I stopped lying. And I stopped taking substances that cause heedlessness. It's you that hasn't stopped. And then this person was like dumbfounded that he would talk to him that way. And this individual asked the Buddha if he could become his student. And the Buddha said, yeah, you can learn with me. So then he ends up shaving his hair, putting on a robe, and becoming a student of the Buddha. And this individual ends up getting to enlightenment during that lifetime. And I use this as a great example for all of you, because sometimes people come to me and they tell me all the things that they've done in the past, and they think that they're such a horrible person. Like, is it possible for me to get to enlightenment? And I said, well, if someone who killed 999 people can get to enlightenment, surely you can too, because I know you haven't killed 999 people. No matter what you've done in the world, you haven't killed 999 people. So surely you can get to enlightenment. So this is another story of someone who's actually tried to kill the Buddha, but a Buddha is going to be making wise decisions. They're not going to experience that kind of thing where someone could attempt to kill a Buddha, but it's unlikely that a Buddha is going to be killed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions anywhere. All right. I don't see any questions anywhere. So it's about 10:30. It's 10:25. This is where I usually take the first break, give you guys a chance to talk with each other, get to know each other, use the restroom, go get some snacks, whatever it is that you would like to do. We have some snacks over here that students provide that you're welcome to help yourself to water and snacks and all that stuff. Just make yourself comfortable. I'm going to start back at 10:45, which is 20 minutes from now, where I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment. Because now that you understand a little bit of the life story of the Buddha and that he got to this enlightened mental state, now I'm going to explain to you what this enlightened mental state is. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you at 10:45. Okay? So thank you so much.